Good evening and great night to my listeners. This is part 4 of the ancient Ethiopians, or the wonderful Ethiopians of the ancient Kushite Empire. Chapter 3, Part 4. The Nubo-Egyptian desert was once abundantly watered in a well-timbered region. With the exclusion of the narrow Nile Valley, all of this is generally a barren waste today. Geology reveals that in the primitive ages, this country had a moist climate, like the Congo Basin, but these conditions prevailed in remote geological times, probably before the creation of the delta. The changes that turned the Sahara into a burning waste in time made Upper Egypt dry and torrid. King describes its climate as often fatal to all but full-blooded natives. Under those brazen skies, the children of even Euro-African half-castes seldom survive after the 10th or 12th year. Passing southward, we find that ancient edifices occur throughout the whole extent of Ethiopia. In the olden days, the climate there was favorable to the nurturing and development of a high type of civilization and produced an Ethiopian so superior to the later types, that they were called by the ancients the handsomest men of the primeval world. The whole of the space between the Nile and Abyssinia and northward to Lower Egypt once constituted Ethiopia. It was called Beled-es-Sudan, the land of the blacks. Once Egypt extended to Lower Nubia, the ancient kingdom of Meroe was Upper Nubia and was divided into agricultural and grazing lands. Crowfoot tells us in his ancient Meroe, pages 29, that Meroe, at the height of its prosperity, was established upon as broad an economic basis as Egypt or Mesopotamia. Ancient authorities tell us that they grew grains upon lands richer and wider than the whole of Egypt, with pastures of limitless plains. Theirs were lands of heavy rains. Precious stones were there in abundance. They produced beautiful painted pottery, and their princes were robed in magnificence. The yearning of the Ethiopian for all things beautiful, his love for ceremony and costly attire, may not be mere imitation but springs from inheritance, from the possession of these things by his ancestors thousands of years ago. Herodotus II, 29, says, Meroe was a great city and metropolis. Here, Zeus Ammon was worshipped in temples of the utmost splendor. The Cyclopedia of Biblical Literature explains, the early prosperity and grandeur of Ethiopia sprang from the carrying trade of which it was the center between India and Arabia on the one hand and the interior of Africa and especially Egypt on the other. There was intimate connection between Egypt and Ethiopia commercially. Thebes and Meroe founded a common colony in Libya. This would prove the close relationship of Thebes, which was Nubian and Meroe. Meroe was the seat of a great caravan route from the north of Africa. Another route went westward across the Sudan. Strabo spoke of this open way in the day of Tartessus, long before the ancient Gades was built. From Meroe eastward extended the great caravan route, by which the wares of southern Arabia and Africa were interchanged. The great wealth of the Kushites arose from this network of commerce which covered the prehistoric world. biblical literature asks these pertinent questions. Whence did Egypt obtain spices and drugs with which she embalmed her dead? Whence the incense that burned on her altars? Whence came into the empire the immense amount of cotton in which her inhabitants were clad, and which her own soil so sparingly produced? And whence came into Egypt the rumors of the Ethiopian gold countries, which Cambyses set out to seek? Whence that profusion of ivory and ebony that Greek and Phoenician artists embellished? Whence the early spread of the name of Ethiopia, celebrated by Jewish poets, as well as by the earliest Grecian bards? Whence but from the international commerce of which Ethiopia was the center and seat? These principal trade routes may still be pointed out by a chain of ruins extending from the shores of the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean. The cities Adule, Axum, Meroe, Thebes, and Carthage were the links in the chain. The merchandise of Ethiopia, of which the Bible so often speaks, passed along this line of cities to less civilized portions of the earth. Herein, in his Ancient Nations of Africa, tells us that commercial intercourse existed between the countries of southern Asia, between India and Arabia, Ethiopia, Libya, and Egypt, which was founded upon their mutual necessities and became the parent of the civilizations of these peoples. The fame of the Ethiopians as a civilized people had forced its way into Greece in the time of Homer. Meroe, the hunger-gated Thebes, Jupiter Ammon, and the oracles in Libya and Greece were woven with the most ancient Greek myths. The Argonautic expedition, the Triton Sea, and the Garden of the Hesperides were flashes from this ancient Ethiopian commerce. Its introduction into Hellas must have been made at a very early period, as shown by the oracle and sanctuary of Dodona. Ethiopian commerce was carried on under the protection of sanctuaries. The priests of Ammon said that the oracles were founded in Greece from Thebes and Meroe. The Pelasgians adopted the Egyptian names of these deities and passed them on to the later Greeks. Herein continues, Meroe from time immemorial had been an oracle of Jupiter. Its soil was extremely fertile. As late as 1000 BC, it was one of the most powerful states of the ancient world. Accounts left us by the ancients have been considered fabulous, but not so to those who have viewed the ruins now covering the site of this once powerful and highly civilized state. Remnants of mighty buildings covered with sculptures, representations of priestly ceremonies and battles, rows of sphinxes and colossi give rise to the question as to which nation, Ethiopia or Egypt, imparted its knowledge to the other. Until historical times, Ethiopia furnished Egypt with gold. Her ravines were worked until the middle of the 12th century. Gold was extracted by crushing, a very costly method, proving that these mines had been very rich and must have been a source of the great profusion of golden articles found in many African ruins and graves. King describes the Fayum district, which grew in great profusion, roses, vine, olives, sugar cane, and cotton. Here the orange and lemon trees attained the size of our apple trees. This district was in more primeval times and depression. An early pharaoh cut a deep channel through the rocky barrier toward the Nile and let in the Western River. Since the 12th dynasty, this lake had been one of blessing and abundance. This tract thus reclaimed from the desert was justly a wonder of Egypt. Here the marvelous lake Moeris received the discharge of the Bahr Yusuf, which was 1/2 the volume of the Nile. It was one of the astounding engineering feats of the Old World and still ranks as one of the most marvelous achievements of mankind. Notwithstanding the drying up of the Lake Meroz, the Fayum is still an important and fertile province. We conclude, thank you tonight for listening. We will conclude this section and this installment of the wonderful Ethiopians of the ancient Kushite Empire. Until next time, I am grateful for your listening ear. Sleep well. I am Baba Diadine Bay. Peace.